Hello, Sandra in Canada.
Hi, Alexandra. You look beautiful. How are you?
Oh, the same. And how are you? I'm very well. And you are going to come to Prague next week already. And you are going to speak at two conferences. And the
Yes.
main conference is on 22nd of July. It's in Prague, in Lucerna. And you will speak especially about NIBIRU flyby preparedness, especially the psychological preparedness, but you will also take question answer and you will discuss other subjects. And then the main conference, the main speech will be on 21st of July in Hotel Radisson Blu, Alcron in Prague. And I show a little bit the banner. And could you introduce yourself a little bit and speak about your speeches? And
Sure. Firstly, thank you. Thank you for all the work you do and for having me on this. I'm a longtime counselor in a little town in Ontario, and I stumbled across satanic abuse and ritual abuse while I was trying to work with people who had been sexually abused. In those days, we didn't believe sexual abuse, and so I set out to find some methods that would work to uncover the repressed sexual abuse, because I realized that was where the power was. You know, the power isn't in what we know, it's in what we've forgotten. That's the PTSD part, and that's the part that controls us, the stuff that we could not digest. So in working to uncover repressed sexual abuse memories, I absolutely stumbled across ritual and satanic abuse, which I did not believe for years. I really thought this was the line where people were crazy and they needed medication and hospitalization. But after a while, you realize they can't all be delusional in the same way. If you have 40 or 50 people telling you the same problem, there has to be a problem. And then my police reports disappeared when I complained about some things to the police. I had a death threat and other things. All the police reports disappeared. And at that point, you have to think there is something happening here that I wasn't seeing. So I worked quietly in my basement basement office for 20 years or more, uncovering these things, and eventually started to speak about them. And the more you dig into this type of abuse, I mean, the horrors of satanic abuse are on, somewhat on YouTube with other things that I have said. I'll leave that part for today because it's awful. And I've said it before. And what you realize is that there are far more people who have been affected by this than you think. And people, generally speaking, they just want to get on with their lives, raise their children, pay their mortgages, go for a beer at the pub, these kinds of things. What we have to realize is that there are powers that are just gradually taking over the world that will affect all of us. And their end goal is to have a slave race. And they are, through a variety of means, chemtrails, food, frequencies, pharmaceuticals, water fluoridation, music, the music industry, the entertainment industry, and through television programming, and it really is programming. They are guiding us to be kind of a stupid group of people who will serve them, and their end goal is that there'll be a few billionaires at the top, a strong police force to keep the rest of us who have been dumbed down in order. And I do believe this has been going on for thousands of years, with the introduction of the interbreeding of aliens and humans. And I know that sounds really crazy, but there are a few things I want to bring in to support that. Firstly, I would ask your listeners to ask themselves what is convincing for them. And I didn't believe any of this either, but I eventually had to come to the conclusion that it was all true. And I have a list of 7 convincers. And if it's in the Bible, if it's scientifically proven, if it's in another culture, if I've heard it many times, if I've had my own experience with it, those are 5, you know, if there are other reasons. There's one other that I misplaced right now in my mind. But there are 7 things that you can use as convincers. So what would be convincing for you that indeed this part of our history has been erased, but it's nonetheless true? And if you read the Bible, there are several references to aliens and other beings. And in Genesis 6, it talks about the sons of the gods lusting after the daughters of men and laying with them. And from this came the Nephilim, and they were giants. And there's all kinds of proof of giants. You know, what you have to realize is that our mainstream media does not report on these things. So what we know is that there was an interbreeding of aliens with the human forms that were here at the time. There is no accounting for the negative factor, like the rhesus negative factor, in the human blood system. So those of us who have Rh negative blood at some point have a history where there was something else that bred with the human. And there's just no accounting for it in the world. So we have evidence, but this information is not widely known. Those who are more, pure blood, so to speak, more alien, have gained power over us, and they want to keep it the way it is. Now, I'm not sure of all of the connections, Alexandra, in terms of who's cooperating with whom or who's not cooperating, but they're in competition or against whom. But there are all these different groups that are doing very destructive things to the planet. Paul Hellyer, the former Canadian Deputy Prime Minister, who is now a man in his 90s, and God bless him, he's still out there trying to wake people up. And he says that it is not whether or not the aliens are here. They are here. It is a question of government transparency. So, we have that level of support, and he's addressed the UN about that. When I first heard that, I couldn't believe that anybody in government would be so bold as to step up and do that, but he did. And there's evidence all over the world for this. The other thing that is happening that would indicate that there are those above what we know to be government. There's this speech by President John Kennedy that I will be quoting when I speak in Prague on the 22nd. And he talks about that there are unseen powers that are running things and gradually taking over. And indeed, this is happening. And in the book World Within Worlds, they talk about the underground bases and so on, where all kinds of things are happening in the US. And I've heard about these underground bases and the underground rail system that rapidly links the East Coast with Colorado, where these bases are said to be. So we know for sure that, A, we are not being given the truth, okay? And B, that the powers that run the world are not friendly to the mainstream population. The Romans used to say, give them bread and circuses. So keep them fed and keep them entertained, and they won't give you any trouble at all. And sadly, this seems to be the state of affairs, where people, if they're entertained and their bellies are full, they don't look around to see, what is happening and who's doing what, and are my children and grandchildren going to be safe, this sort of thing. And they're lulled to sleep. And what I'm hoping to do is to wake people up to the truth of what is going on in in this world so that you can take your own power back. And the thing is, how do you take your power back? We have been so abused that we are so deeply into this program that we don't even realize it. One of the bigger abuses from my point of view is the abuse of time. And, you know, in days gone by, your time would be your own internal clock, and you would go by the seasons and what phase of the moon there was and so on. And you would do things on your own time clock. When I had the fortunate experience of living in the Northwest Territories and lived close to a tribe of Dog-Rib Indians. And they had only had very limited contact with the white men. So they were still smoke tanning hides and living off the land and so on. 15 years before I arrived, if the caribou herd hadn't gone through, these people would have starved to death. And I met the man that rounded up the Inuit and helped the government put them in communities. You know, I think he thought he was doing a good thing. He was a good man. His name was Don Pruden. And so I was there just when it was going from a tribal society that lived off the land and had huge respect for the land and communicated with the plants and the animals and so on. And they were just becoming integrated into white society. And the way they told time was like, when spirit moves me, then I'll do it. So that was a very internal locus of control. They went according to their own clock, their own inner clock, and not, you know, a watch that somebody would tell them. They thought watches were ridiculous, you know, how stupid is that? And I know that as one who's astral projected, that when you get into an astral state, that time is not an issue. You know, you can think it and be there. You can go anywhere, do anything. And we don't realize how trapped we are in this time bubble that we have. We are, to quote Judith K. Moore, we are in a time prison. And when you look at what is happening on this earth, not only are we dividing time irrationally, in my view, into months that don't fit with the moon, and at one point a pope asked for his birthday that the whole numbering of the year system be changed, so that any prophecies are out of date, or, you know, they're wrong because of the 2 or 3 year difference in the number of the year. But we have been so alienated from being in sync with nature. There's a Mexican shaman named Mazatlán, and he says until we get back to using nature to help us with time and spirit, that we're lost. You know, we're out of sync with everything. But of course, that is the goal of the Illuminati, is to alienate us from ourselves, from nature, from time. And when you look at how we use time, you know, one of my sons, when he was working in Germany, he was 2 minutes late for work one day, and the boss was like, "You are late." And he said, "It's only 2 minutes, and usually he turned up early." And it's like, it didn't matter, you're late. 2 minutes. I mean, how much tension is that, you know? And when you look at professional sports, where they shave it down to a 1/10 of a second, you're the winner and you won by a 1/10 of a second, and you lost. There's all kinds of shame for you, you know. A 1/10 of a second. I think everybody who shows up at the Olympics should get a gold medal. I mean, it's craziness. And we are so trapped by time and made so anxious by time. That is one thing that I think is really important. The other is, so firstly, get that internal locus of control. Learn how to self-reference. Excuse me. Excuse me. I talked myself into a dry throat. So we have to always look to somebody else who's prettier or more athletic or richer or smarter or thinner or, you know, more talented, whatever. And these people are being put before us night and day, you know, that they're the beautiful people. We suck, you know, we're terrible. It isn't the truth. Every one of us is beautiful and talented. And we just have to have faith in ourselves that has been so eroded by having to conform to societal norms, and we're told what to do and how to be. No, find yourself, find your internal locus of control. What's in your heart? What's in your mind? What talent do you have to bring out? Trust yourself. The other way that we are being controlled is by being alienated from our energetic systems. And we are not just a physical body, we are a spiritual body with energy in our aura and in our chakras, our assemblage point and our meridians. And when those things are in good shape, we think properly, we feel great, our muscles work, we have vitality, our organs work. But when those things are not working for us, then we get the concomitant problems, such as not being able to think straight, being confused, being hysterical or terrified in our feelings, with sickness and so on, that result from an energy field that isn't working properly. But we've been denied this information since for thousands of years. I'm convinced that the burning of the library in Alexandria was to preserve esoteric information into the hands of the few. And then, of course, we had the Inquisition, where 3 to 9 million European women, mostly, some men, but mostly women, were burned at the stake for knowing about these things. And then with the European imperialistic surge, they went around the world killing anybody who knew about this stuff. Now, why would they go to all that trouble? Maybe because it was so important. And one of the things that I have found in dealing with satanic ritual abuse is that, I mean, there are many, many groups out there that do things that are, they just go through the motions. They don't know really why they do it, they just do it. There are some very powerful groups out there who preserve ancient knowledge, and they know how to get energy or gifts from a person, how literally to steal your soul. And we've been so led away from the energetic part of life that we do not realize how important that is. And that this life is really a test to see how spiritually, how much we can succeed spiritually. Dr. David Hawkins put out a book called Power versus Force. And if you haven't read Dr. Hawkins, it's really a valuable resource. And he put out something called A Scale of Consciousness, and I have a copy of it in this book. I've just written for permission to use it, but I'll do it anyway. And on this scale of consciousness, can you see that, Alexandra? From Map of Consciousness by Dr. David Hawkins.
Yeah.
And on it, he puts the emotions in a certain order, starting with shame, guilt, apathy, grief, fear, desire, anger, pride, and courage, and going all the way up to acceptance, reason, love, joy, peace, and enlightenment. And, you know, there are steps for how to achieve, get out of each of those states and to progress to the next one. And the Illuminati and so on, those lower fourth dimensionals, believe it or not, they feed on our fear, our lust, our desire, our shame, our guilt. I mean, they want us in that lower region of vibration because that's when they can control and access us. If, on the other hand, we are doing our own spiritual progress work, then they can't access us. If we're in love, if we are in a state of joy and love, no matter what, the Bible says, don't let anything steal your peace, you know. So if you can maintain that sense of love no matter what, then you are beyond their reach. It's like, you know, you made it to home base or something. However, they want us in these very low regions, and those who control the world put out all kinds of movies, and like generally speaking, the whole population is affected by this stuff. But people don't see it. They specifically target people who are often the more talented among us, so they can steal their energy and their gifts. And Fran and myself have written a book called Healing Satanic Mechanisms. And in this little booklet, it shows, I don't know if you can see that, but it shows how they put in certain devices on our energetic field in order to limit or drain the energy from those people who have gone through the specific rituals. And, you know, the one thing I have to say for these people is they have a huge amount of ancient information and a huge amount of ability in terms of being able to control us energetically. And of course, there are the high-tech people. And I'm sure most of your viewers know that during Operation Paperclip, the Nazi war criminals were brought to the United States to train the CIA in torture, and that the CIA experimented on some 2 million Americans and Canadians in order to perfect these methods. And they used frequencies and electronics, high-tech things as well, in order to control populations. And they continue, you know, to perpetrate these kinds of tortures. They also started, in order so that people would not remember what happened during the MK Ultra years, they put millions of dollars into backing the false memory group. So anytime anybody says, oh, those are false memories, like the CIA, they're the originators of false memory, you know, so that the rest of us would not remember what was being done to us. Like they're experimenting with drugs and stuff that will wipe out our memories. Why would we want to do that? That's where our power is. If we heal those memories, we get our power back. But that isn't how it is. You know, they don't want us to be powerful. These governments are not working in our favor. And because they are not, with NIBIRU or any other tragedy, any other event that causes post-traumatic stress, we have to do our own preparation in dealing with PTSD. And PTSD is an overwhelming neuroendocrine response to a trauma that you couldn't deal with. Okay, something happened that was so huge you couldn't process it. And what the brain does is pack away parts of it that it feels, well, we can't deal with that right now, but we'll deal with it later. And when I'm uncovering memories, a lot of people get migraines because the cortisol releases the memory, and for some reason that causes headaches and dizziness and so on. But it's necessary as a process to go through in order to heal. So what can you do about PTSD? Well, one huge thing I mentioned earlier was that energetic piece. When you are under that kind of stress, your entire energy field shuts down. And every time you see something that reminds you of the stressor, again, your energy field shuts down. So, and the triggers for that could be many and varied. I had a woman who was in a car accident that, you know, where her husband died. Had a couple of those actually. And for this one woman, always people in these situations say, well, I never felt the same after the trauma. And it's because your energetic field never went back to the same position. And you can balance out your field so that you can do things like Gary Craig has very generously put online a 2-hour free presentation of emotional freedom technique, and it's a tapping technique that works beautifully. I teach people a swaying technique, you know, that they can use to turn their energy field back on. I also have a little booklet called Own Your Power, and in this booklet, I teach people how to do certain motions and diet and so on that will help them turn their energetic switches back on. So swaying, tapping, energy balancing, EMDR, everything has a frequency, and essential oils work, and herbs work, food work, exercise works, hand movements work, colors, sound therapy, dealing with the elements. There are so many things that will heal us that we have been led away from. And, you know, we need to take responsibility for our own personal post-traumatic stress response and for our own emergency situation. So in a case like NIBIRU, for example, there could be electromagnetic failure, so you might need a shortwave radio. There are short and long-term things that could happen. You know, if NIBIRU was anywhere near our planet, there could be all kinds of tidal interruptions or space stuff falling that would be very dangerous. You'd need to find a cave or a mine shaft or something where you could go and get protection. You'd need a stock of food. You'd need equipment like shovels and things like that in order to start again. Some research I've done says to get kayaks to get to the sea, because that's where the most amount of life would be. So this is all online. There's a lot of information online. And for psychological preparedness, for resilience training, I mean, why wait till you get PSD in order to deal with it? No, you prepare every day, you know. And how prepared do you have to be comfortable? Do you need to be physically prepared? I mean, most people are doing nothing. You know, we're doing a little bit of something. We're not moving to a mountain or, you know, getting our own hydro or anything like that, or your supply of food. But, you know, everybody has a limited amount of food on hand. Getting seeds that are not GMO would be really huge in the event of a major disaster. How do you prepare psychologically, though? One is that I think that people are unprepared. One is because they don't know how to balance their energy, and they don't have the internal psychological skills. So you need that internal locus of control. You need to take care of yourself physically in order to be able to think straight. So all of the usual things like sleep, sunshine, grounding, hydration, proper nutrition, exercise, stretching, all of those things play a role in being able to handle something psychologically. And so what more do you need to do? Well, you need intellectual and emotional flexibility. Those of us who are stuck in a routine and think this is how it should be, and then when the tragedy happens, what happens doesn't in any way measure up with what you expect. And you know, recognize that what you expect of life is not always going to happen, and stay with your present time frame. What is happening right now? And get a solution-oriented focus. And it doesn't matter about how unfair it is or how it shouldn't be. Deal with what is. And if you're always the sort of timid, shy person and the moment calls for some courage, practice courage and jump into it with courage. It is about having that, not being overly identified or addicted to your own personality, but doing what the moment calls for. Knowing how to be cooperative with other people, having a huge faith in God, and going into an acceptance of, you know, this is what's happening right now. I have a brother whom I respect enormously and have much love for, And at one point, he was a very, very wealthy man. And then something happened, and he lost everything. He lost absolutely everything. And I asked him one day, well, you know, how do you feel about that? And he said, well, it's what is. You know, this is what I have to do now. And I have so much respect for the grace and the flexibility with which he entered into that situation. The other thing is to create harmony within yourself, like bring your own self into congruence, your mind, your body, your thoughts, your emotions, so that you are a powerful person. Have an optimistic point of view. Always be looking for, okay, here are the lemons, where's the lemonade, you know, and figure out what's the good side of this. And at one point, like I'm traveling this week, so I had my travel money put away somewhere, and I could not find it. And so I thought, okay, I'm just going to be cool about this. You know, I know it's around somewhere. If I don't find it at some point, you know, I'm going to find that money, and it will be a gift at the time. And maybe I'll need it more then than I need it now. I found it, okay, so good to go. But it's about seeing the positives and staying in that happy frame of mind. Having a faith really helps. And our churches have all been infiltrated and compromised by the powers that be. So we've been led down spiritual blind alleys where, you know, it's more about social action. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not saying that social action is a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. But it doesn't replace a deep faith that there's something in control of our universe, that it's moving along in an orderly fashion. Einstein said that the biggest thing you have to decide is it a friendly universe? And I think ultimately, for me, it is a friendly universe. There are a few clouds, a little bit of trouble in the way, but you keep your eye on that North Star. You know, in my speech, I mentioned that when the slaves were running away from slavery in the United States, they came to Canada, and they would run at night, you know, so they wouldn't be found. And the way they guided themselves to Canada was to follow the drinking gourd, you know, the Big Dipper with the North Star at the end of the handle. And they just kept walking towards that North Star. That was their goal, to follow the North Star into Canada, where there was no slavery. I mean, prejudice, yes. Worry, no. You know, people aren't perfect. So we have to have a North Star. What is our primary value? You know, without which nothing. You know, what do you stand for? And what do I stand for? And what does each person listening stand for? And so we have to figure that out. And when you have that personal relationship with the loving God, you know somehow it's going to work out. And you have to ask. The Bible says you have not because you ask not. And so you have to ask for help. And sometimes it comes in a way you don't always expect. My husband, who's a poet, he's always writing things on pieces of paper, and I found one, and it said, chaos is just a level of order that we don't yet understand. Chaos is a level of order that we don't yet understand. And I just thought that was beautiful. So sometimes I'm like, well, God, I don't really see why you're doing this or the point of this. But in the end, I have to trust. You know, I have to trust that it's working out okay. So another point in resilience training is to be able to handle your emotions. You know, to be in charge of your feelings. Like you and I, we are driving our own buses. You know, everybody out there is either out of control of their vehicle or totally, you know, driving their own bus. And get to know your emotions, be familiar with them, learn how to comfort yourself and how to talk in a beautiful, supportive way to yourself. And, you know, nobody does everything perfectly. So be hugely forgiving. There are all kinds of biochemical and electromagnetic wonderful things that happen when you forgive. I think we think that if I forgive, then my enemy, the one that hurt me so badly, gets away with it, you know. No, you don't forget, and you still have to be wary of that person. And I mean, there's some people I won't associate with because I know what they're capable of. Why should I do that to myself? But have I forgiven them for what they did to me? Yes. Not necessarily for their sake, but for mine, because I know that unforgiveness is, it's not healthy for me. So I forgive them for my sake. And because I want to stay in that high frequency range where I'm leading a good life no matter what is going on around me. I mean, I had a stroke in my 60s and I had cancer. And when I had cancer, it was the worst kind of cancer, skin cancer, melanoma. And I didn't know for 6 weeks whether I would live or die. So I went through the whole summer without that information. And I thought, you know what, if I'm going to live, it doesn't make any difference anyway. And if I'm going to die, then I want to have a good time. You know, I don't want this to bring me down. So I had a very good summer, a happy summer, loving my husband, loving my family, you know, seeing some friends. And it turned out I made it. So no problem. And plus the happy emotions helped me to deal with it, because when you create happy emotions, you create happy biochemistry, and that cures you anyway. So yeah, I guess to create resilience, get to know and love yourself, be flexible in who you are, stay in present time, have an internal locus of control, be your own best friend and support yourself with love and joy, forgiveness and understanding, because that forgiveness spills over to you. Electromagnetically balance yourself. Learn how to do that. It's a very simple thing. Those who write to me, Sandra Fecht at Rogers.com, SandraFecht@Rogers.com. I can send you an electronic copy of Own Your Power. And I have a PayPal account so people can pay for it that way. And yeah, take responsibility. The government isn't going to do it for you. If there's any national disasters such as NIBIRU, then the government actually says that preparedness is the responsibility of individuals as well as government. And to some degree, I agree with that. You know, I don't want to be rounded up and put in a camp and let my well-being be up to the government. You know, I want to do it for myself and get the skills you need right now. Like, you know, take a gardening course, take a firearms course, whatever you need to do so that you feel comfortable and ready to deal with whatever situation comes up. The Bible says, be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. Like, keep learning, you know, lifelong learning. And so I would encourage everyone to bring out the best in themselves. Yes, it's a bit of effort, and yes, you might not be sitting on the couch watching television, but in the end, it pays out big time.
Yeah. Sandra, thank you so very much. I would also mention you will come to Prague now in July.
Yes.
But, you are coming to Europe one more time in September.
Yes. I'm going to Ireland. Miles Johnson and Katerina Kavungu are putting on a conference in Dublin on the 15th of September, I think it is. Yes, and it's at the Talbot Hotel in Dublin. weekend of 15, 16, 17, and I will be available for consults on the 18th. Then I'm going to London, and that place has yet to be announced, but I'll be doing a 3-day workshop there, mostly on trauma and PTSD and how to deal with that. But thank you so much, Alexandra, for your devotion and for the opportunity you give people like me to make our work known.
Thank you so much, Sandra. And we see each other in Prague, and I hope many people will come and will listen to your speech, to your lectures.
And I'm looking forward to it. I'm very excited about it. Thanks again.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.